Alright, I'm going to show you how to make a simple tool that you're going to find very useful for troubleshooting electrical problems and testing appliances, just about anything that's 120 volts that you're going to run into. And amperage checks will help and tell you a lot of good information. So what I've got here, this is just basic SO cord. Same stuff you'd find in an extension cord. This happens to be 14 gauge. I wouldn't go much smaller than 14 gauge. You can go bigger, like a 12 gauge would be bigger than 14 gauge. That would be fine. But 14 gauge will do you just fine. We're going to take and we're going to cut off about 2 feet of this. So with about 2 feet of this cut off, first thing I'm going to do is strip back my ends, because I'm going to put these cord caps on there. This is just your standard NEMA 5-15P, the P for plug. I'm going to put that on one end. And then we have the corresponding NEMA 5-15 right there. Just your standard plug like you'd have on any extension cord. You could even actually use an extension cord for this, but you don't want to really go ideally longer than 2 feet, or you're going to get some inaccurate readings. So I'm going to strip my ends off here. I like to go about 1.5 to 2 inches, and I'm not going all the way through. I'm just squeezing until I can feel I'm a little bit into the rubber. And then as you bend this around, you'll see it tears itself rather easily. And you can just pull that piece off, strip your wire back. You can see I have 3 conductors, a hot, a neutral, and a ground. Trim this stuff off just so it's not real ugly. This is just a strand they run through the wire. It's rolled up paperboard, sometimes it's fiberglass. It just ran through the wire for no reason other than just to make it stronger. All we're really wanting are these 3 actual wires. You can tell you got the wires because they have the copper in the end of them. So that's one end. I'm going to do the same thing to this end. Again, about 1.5 to 2 inches. I don't want a bunch of wire sticking out my end. I'm going to bend that back. Pull my end off. And then again, I'm going to do the same thing here. Separate my 3 wires and just trim off these reinforcement strands. Alright, now what we want to do is we want to get somewhere in about the middle of our wire. I'll just hold these 2 ends together, and we're there. We don't have to be exact. You don't have to measure it. Here it's a little easier to use a razor knife. And what I'm going to do is I want to get this black insulation off the outside of this wire, and I want to give myself a good 4 or 5 inches. So again, I'm not cutting all the way through the black. I'm just kind of scoring a line around the outside. I do not want to cut into the wires themselves. So there's one. And let's see how I did. It's much easier to not go deep enough the first time, because you can come back and slice a little more later. what I'm making here, you can actually buy these already made, but I find, why buy something if I've already got all the stuff to make one around? I don't have to pay for anything. I've already got excess wire, plugs. If you wanted to, you could even sacrifice an old extension cord to doing this. So, then I'm going to go about 4 or 5 inches over. Being very careful not to cut all the way through the block, because I don't want to have bare copper wire exposed when we're done. So, get that one pretty good. You're just going to twist this stuff around after you get a line cut in it, and it'll score. That's not my black wire, that's the black on the outside here. Alright, now I like to run along the ground wire just to be safe. If I nick that one, it doesn't really matter. That's your green wire. I don't know if you can see that. There's my black wire, my white wire, and my green wire. So I'll lay it down very carefully. And again, I don't want to cut all the way through the black. I just want to kind of cut me a line right along there. And then we'll bend that back, and it should just tear real easy. And I'll peel that piece off. That's garbage. Twist my wires, and again I'm going to get rid of that reinforcement stuff. Snip, snip, one more. Again, these aren't wires I'm cutting. It's reinforcement fibers running through the inside of this wire. So now you can see what I've done. Stripped away a little bit of that black insulation. Again, about 4 or 5 inches. Doesn't have to be exact, and now you can see I have 3 separate but still insulated wires on the inside middle of my cord. So next, let's put it this way before I cut myself. Now I'm going to take these plugs apart. Just 2 or 3 little screws in the end of them. Now we're just going to loosen those screws up. Pull this apart. This is the end cap. I'm going to feed it through one side. I like to feed it through before I strip my wires back. It just makes it a little easier. Not that it's hard. And then here, if we look on this end, you'll see where my wires go. We're definitely going to want to have our hot wire and our neutral wire in the right places. Most of these plugs and outlets, if you look carefully at them, you'll see one screw is gold. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that. The other screw is silver. The gold screw is your black wire. Silver screw is your white wire. That's going to be the easiest way to remember it. The green screw, if you can see that down in there, that is your ground wire. So gold, black and gold, white and silver, green is ground. And then when you plug this into your actual wall outlet, what you'll find is the one with your black wire on it is also going to be the hot side of your outlet if your outlet is wired right. And this is going to be your neutral, and this is going to be your ground. So what I'm going to do now, strip back just a little bit of this wire. A lot of people will tend to strip way more than they need to off. So you can see how much I got there. That's all you need. Probably maybe a little over 1/4 of an inch, 5/16. 1/4 inch is pretty good. And again, I'm being careful that I don't cut any of my copper conductors. Sometimes you'll do that. It's no big deal, but you want to avoid doing it if you can. Again, about 1/4 of an inch. And I like to twist my wires to the right, just to keep them all together, and keep from having little ends sticking out. So now you're going to look at the inside of your cord. This one has the screws already tightened, so I'm going to have to loosen up these little screws in there. Again, you can get a better look at it. This one's gold, that's your black wire. This one's green, that's your ground. That one's silver, that's going to be your white neutral wire. So I'm going to loosen the screws up in this plug. So that I can get the little clamping plate backing out of the way from the hole where I'm going to stick the wires in. And if you can see that little plate moving, when you're doing this in the real world, you will be able to see it. Not a big fan of this plug type, but it'll work for what we want to do. Okay, now I got my wire stripped back. Again, I want my black wire going to the gold, my white wire going to the silver, my green wire right there in the middle. So I'm just going to stick that wire into the little hole, being careful not to get copper strands sticking outside of my hole. And then I'm going to tighten the screw down on it. We want it tight. We don't want any loose connections. But again, you don't want it so tight that you break the plastic. So tight, but not too tight. I don't know how many inch-pounds that was, but now I'm going to put my white wire in. Again, white wire goes to the silver screw, or the left-hand side if you're looking at it as if you're plugging it into the outlet. There's that. Tighten that screw. And lastly, my black wire is going to go right over here to there. I'm looking through the plastic to make sure I got it pushed down. We don't want to tighten the screw onto the insulation. We want the screw to tighten down on the copper. And you'll be able to feel it when you push it in there. And tighten that one down tight, but without breaking the plastic. Alright, I'm just going to shove that in there a little bit. So I don't want this end hanging out the back of my cord. And most of these, apparently not this one, has a little plastic groove on here that you need to line up with the two sides. This one doesn't matter, so you just want to make sure you get your screws lined up down in there with those screw holes. And then these little tabs, which when you tighten this down, what these are going to do is clamp onto this and keep your wire from pulling out the end of your cord. And there should be a little groove you'll see down in there. All the outlets are basically the same. This is kind of a weird one. So push that all together. I want to make sure I don't have black, green, or white wire sticking out this end. And then just tighten my screws down. The screws snug up pretty good. They'll actually pull into the box a little bit. And that's what gives you the clamping force on your outer insulation. There we go. Most of these will tighten down until the top is flush with the housing. This one looks like it's going to sit out just a little bit. So there we go. I give that a little tug, make sure we're tight. Make sure none of these are loose. All right, there's one side done. Now we're going to do our female side. It's a different brand plug. I kind of did this deliberately so that you could see a couple different styles of plugs here. And this one's got 3 screws that hold it in. I think, nope, they're not all the way loose yet. So loosen these little screws up. We can take this end off. Okay, my 2 halves separated. If you do enough of these enough times, you'll end up eventually putting this all together and then realizing you forgot to put this side on your wire first. And you'll have to take it apart. It happens. Couldn't even begin to count how many times I've done that. You get in a hurry. Alright, so again, I'm going to strip back just about a 1/4 inch of wire. I want enough so that it's setting inside the little sockets there, but not so much that I have bare copper wire sticking back out the end. So about a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch. Twist my wires. I guess if you're a real purist, you wouldn't want to get oil from your fingers on the wires. You know, I've got cords that I made 15, 20 years ago where I did this with my fingers. Don't tell the purists. And they're still working just fine today, 15, 20 years later. Again, on this cord cap, this is my female end. And you'll notice I have a silver screw, a gold screw, and a green screw. And just like the other side, my white goes to silver, my green goes to gold, or my green goes to green, my black goes to gold. So I like to put my grounds in first, no particular reason. Safety. In case you're doing this live, probably shouldn't be doing that. I would suggest unplugging this other end before you do something like this. So, snug that up, give it a little tug to make sure it's in there good. There's my white screw, or my silver screw. My white wire is going to go right down in that hole. And on this one, you can actually see where your copper's at in your insulation. You don't want to pinch the insulation in that little clamp because you might not get a good connection on your copper. So now I'm just going to tighten the screw on the side, and you can watch that little clamp tightening up on this one right under the copper. If you make it good and tight, and even if you did get some insulation in the clamping part, it'll squish enough to not matter. So, and lastly, there's my gold screw, my black wire. And I always found it's easier to remember these by the color, black and gold, white and silver. It's easier to remember them by the color than trying to remember which one's hot and which one's cold, and trying to look at this and flip it around in your head and end up getting confused. Not much to confuse about with black and gold, white and silver. Tighten it up. This might be the first time I ever did this without stabbing myself with the screwdriver. Alright, so Give it a good tug. Check all my wires again to make sure they're in there tight. And I'm pulling on them. Don't be afraid to pull on it, because if you can pull it out, you didn't get it in there good. So I'm pulling pretty hard and it's not coming out. So we're good there. I'm just going to smash a little bit of this down. I actually stripped back a little more of the black than I needed to. Now this one has the groove in there I was talking about. There's a little groove, plastic piece that's raised right there. And that is going to correspond with an indentation on this side. Sometimes these things are hard to find, but I think it's right there. We'll try to line it up at that point. Let's get back on there. Let's see how that lines up with our screws. Yep, our screws go into the hole. Just going to line that little tab up. Oops. And see, that pushes down. Now see, that's what I don't want. When I put this end on, I don't want all that exposed wire. What I'll do is leave this pulled out a little bit. Those wires will smash in there, it's no big deal. I'll put that, you see I'm leaving this end out first. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down. I'm going to change my bit. It's a little easier. Push that in so that I'm clamping down on the insulation. And I like to tighten these down evenly. Don't be afraid to go all the way down with it either. I need to hold it firmly. You're not going to crush that wire and hurt it. That's good enough. You could go all the way down if you wanted to. I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. So now, I'm going to force this end in there and hold it in while I tighten these screws. Just a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And that's it, we're done. There's our tool. We have a male end, we have a female end, and we have 3 separated wires here on the inside. What this is going to allow you to do is, with a lot of 120 volt appliances or equipment or lights or anything you're going to be plugging in to test, there's usually not an easy way to do an amperage test. An amperage test, you'll see in my other videos where I'll explain how to do that and what kind of meters and stuff you need to do with that, if you don't already know. Amperage test can tell you a lot of good information, especially when you're troubleshooting electrical problems. But what this is going to do is allow me to take my amp clamp, and I can do a couple things. I can go and clamp it now around my hot wire and do an amperage reading when I have this end plugged in, of course, and whenever I'm testing my appliance or tool or whatever plugged into this end. Now I can get an amperage reading with my amp clamp. Another thing you can do, when you plug the thing in and you start to run it, you can go around your green wire, which is your ground, and you can make sure you're not getting any amperage reading on that. If you're getting amperage back through your green wire, you got something shorted out somewhere and it's not safe. So you're going to want to look into where you're getting that from. But that's another lesson for another day. For now, there's a very simple tool, easy to make, that you can use for doing amperage tests. And if you don't have any cord like this, you could just cut off 2 feet off the end of an extension cord. Save whichever end you want to use from your extension cord, strip back a little bit of wire, and there you go. You can also buy these already made. They make a plastic one. It's got square cutouts in it. You know, they're not that expensive. If you're already going to go out and just buy all the stuff to make this thing, probably just buy one already made. But if you're like me, you got extra SO cord laying around, you got a couple plugs laying around, and you just need to make something to test with. You don't want to have to drive to the hardware store or wherever, the supply house, to get yourself an actual test tool. Yeah, you can easily make yourself one. And that's it. Thanks for watching.